This week we got the engine out of the 420 and taken apart. I've got a rototiller running that hadn't run in a long time. Also did a little bit of work on those tractor panels I was talking about before, and we got a little work done on a couple of motorcycles.
Alright, so in preparing to pull the engine out of this 420, I've got the hood and the grill off of it. I took the, loosened the tensioner for the drive belts for the PTO. Got those off. Electrical connectors are undone, getting ready to undo the fuel line, and the breather is off of it. So the battery tray is out of it, so I've got access to the drive shaft. I put a big screwdriver to the U-joint, so and wedged with the brake levers, so I'll be able to get in there and loosen it without having to hold it. So here's the engine up out of the chassis. Definitely not a job for the faint-hearted. Got it laid up there so I can get the starter cable taken off, and that's the only thing holding it on. The engine can come out. Alright, so got the engine out, sitting on the trailer, draining the oil out now. Looks pretty horrible. Next thing we'll do is start taking the engine apart. Just got the oil pan off the 420. You can see there's no connecting rod on that journal because most of it is right there in the pan. So this is as much of the puzzle as I can put together. That's what's left of the big end of the connecting rod. The pieces put it together. Little pieces there at the top, that's part of the piston space. So it's going to need a piston and a connecting rod and a bearing for sure. We'll see what else it's going to need once we get it apart. So I got the head bolts loose. I'm going to pop the head off and get ready to pull this piston out. So I blew a lot of oil up in that thing. Probably, well, I know we damaged the piston, I'm sure of that. Alright. There's our piston. What's left of the skirt's gone and the rod's left there. The cylinder actually feels pretty good. So I think we got lucky there. So the completion of the 420 is pending on me finding a connecting rod and a piston. Been busy doing other things. We'll get back on this thing pretty soon though.
So we got the first round of aluminum panels for that pulling tractor prepped and ready. We're going to use some aluminum cleaner to clean them up before we prime them. And then we're going to let them flash, flip them over, do the other side, and then come back another day to spray the paint. So hopefully this will work out okay.
So I got 3 of the panels done and primer on both sides. Got one more coat to put on them. This one got to hold off and needs a little filler on the corners. So we'll get that done, and then we'll get that one primed probably tomorrow. So we can get all these blocked down, get some red on them, then move on to the next series of panels. You see these already have the Zeus fasteners put in them. I'm not a big fan of that. I'd rather paint the panels and then put the Zeus fasteners in later. The paint's going to chip on these really quickly. That's how some of the other panels were already done. That's how he wanted them done. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright, so you can see where I've already started block sanding. You've seen this done in previous episodes. It's got the dye powder on it, so you can see where I've sanded in the light gray area there to the right, and where the low spots are as I'm sanding over to the left there. So we'll get all that sanded down and blocked down until all the scratches are gone. Then it'll be ready to wet sand and start painting. Alright, so I got the tank covers and the seat off, so now I'm about to pull the intakes off this side so we can push the carburetors through the other side once I get everything taken off. You see I have the carburetors moved over to the left side of the bike. The air box is out of it, so I have access to the 2 vacuum slides because they have to come off in order to get the carburetors to clear the frame to get them to go out. That's the slide and the main jet needle, so you have to be really careful with that. Alright, so there they are. After taking the caps off of the needles, the slides here, and the top off this diaphragm, I was able to clear the frame. So now we'll get these things apart and clean them up, and get it back in and get this thing running again. After getting 2 of the bowls off of the Goldwing carburetors, it don't look too bad in there, but it's definitely going to have to be gone through. Alright, so I'm also going to be working on this rototiller here. The pull rope has been pulled out of it. My twins a couple years ago decided they wanted to just keep yanking on that thing until it finally wouldn't go back in anymore. So now I've got to clean the carburetor, but the first thing I'm going to do is get that pull off of there and try to get it fixed. And then we'll get the carb straightened out. Got the bolts out already, so get this thing pulled off. This actually is going right back up in there. Might just need to be, yeah, it looks like it just maybe needs a little bit of grease. Let's just start working and get that wasp nest out of there. And there you go. So I'll grease this thing up a little bit and then put it back together. And we're going to get that carburetor taken off. Alright, so we have the air filter top loose, and you're going to see what I've already seen. It's how bad this filter is. So we're going to have to replace that as well, but I would have already done that. So you got the screws holding the tank to the carburetor off, but I need to remove the carburetor. And in order to do that, I have to take the muffler off. So I'm doing that here now, so I can get to that one screw that's behind it. And get the muffler out of the way. Fortunately, so far, nothing's broke, which is good. Alright, so now I can get to those bolts and get that carburetor off of there. Alright, so this bolt for the carburetor I had to pretty much destroy to get it out. You can see it's bent. I had to use a chisel on it to get it to come out. But I got it out, so we can replace that. That's not an issue. And then taking this carburetor off with the pickup. It don't look the best, but we're going to see if we can work some magic on it, or maybe I have one of these laying around. Alright, so as you saw, this is the carburetor off of that rototiller. Pretty nasty in there. I'm not sure if there's going to be much that we can do with this one. And the tank as well. I did have one of these laying around. It's carburetor and tank assembly, the whole thing. The difference is that the choke and idle are all set up on the same one here, whereas the one that came off of it only has the choke. The throttle is actually up on the handle. So as long as I can get this throttle to actuate, I should be able to just use this entire assembly once I clean it, and this should work just fine. So glad I had this laying around, and that's why I have a hard time throwing this kind of stuff away, because you never know when you're going to need it. Alright, I got the carburetor cleaned up for the most part. Pulls fuel from everywhere it's supposed to pull fuel from and flow through. This is the fuel pump here. Uses the negative and positive pressures as the engine is running to pulsate this diaphragm, and that's what pulls the fuel up from inside the tank. So it's not a gravity feed; it's a suction feed. Works kind of like a weed eater does, a two-stroke chainsaw too, in a lot of cases. Alright, so I had it running yesterday, but then I changed the oil. So let's see if we can get her started this morning. Alright, so it does work and the times work, so I want to get a new air filter for it. We'll put it to work. So one of the things I never got to point out about this rototiller is that it's a Heckinger. Heckinger was a home improvement company like Home Depot and Lowe's back from 1911 to 1999. Home Depot came around in 77, so they're probably the ones that put them out of business. Lowe's have been around since the 20s. But this is where my parents and uncles and all went to get their home improvement stuff, like we do Home Depot today. Alright, so here we have an 84 GPz Kawasaki 550 that I gave to my son a few years ago, and we're going to try to get this thing fired off. It's been a while since it's run, but we're going to pressure wash it off first. It's all cleaned off now, so it's going to be a whole lot easier to work on. So definitely made a big difference. Since this bike hasn't run in a few years, we're going to soak the cylinders a little bit with some oil, and then crank it over, get the rings nice and wet, get the cylinders wet, and then we'll check for fire. So we're going to sneak up on this thing and not just try to fire it up right away, because that could do damage to it. Alright, for oil in the cylinders, we've cranked it a little bit. Now we're going to check to see if we've got compression. We're not using an actual compression gauge at this point. Just putting our finger over the hole is good enough just to make sure we do have compression. Next thing we're going to do is check for fire. So it looks like the carburetors were already done on this thing before we got it. Bowls are really nice inside. We're going to check float levels though to make sure they're okay, but I think these things will be ready to just put right back on the bike and maybe get it fired up next week. So everything looked real good inside the carburetors. We had one needle that was sticking just a little. Took it out and cleaned it and put it all back together, and I think we're in good shape. So Michael's putting the bowls back on, and we'll be ready to go back on the bike. So a couple episodes back I said I was going to acquaint you with one of the many motorcycles that I own. This one happened to be sitting in my living room. What you'll notice though about this one is that the floor is different now. I redid the floor and the step. Gave it a new place to stand. But this is a 1965 Honda CB450, or commonly referred to as a Black Bomber. Very rare bike, very awesome story. Not only about this particular bike, but about the Black Bombers in general. But won't bore you with those. You can look those up. But it is an incredible piece, and I'm happy to own it. Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have some red paint put on those pulling tractor panels, and we'll see how far along we get with the GPz as well as the Goldwing. See you next week.